landscape of Philippine cinema and reflect on the notion of regional filmmaking in national, local, and global formations. Next slide. Okay, Tupog Imatwe, while it portrays the centuries-old way of life of an indigenous community, is animated by global forces as much as it contributes to regional art production. So, what I'm saying essentially in that sentence is that Tupog Imatwe is about the Lumad, but it also is contextually about global filmmaking. In both contexts, the film occupies a marginal space, but the significance of these marginalities is not the same. As a local film in the global context, the time for such a film has inevitably come. But as a regional film in the national context, its arrival has actually come quite late. Arnel Mardocchio's and R.D. Barbarona's previous films, so sila yung screenwriter and director of Tupog Imatwe, as well as other films beyond NCR, have been spotlighted in Cinema Region, the flagship project of the NCCA. Since 2008, Cinema Region has grown from programming a handful of films in its first year to showing over 100 films in its 11th year. Sa Dumaguete po ginanap yung Cinema Region this year, no? So naglilipat-lipat siya ng lugar. NCCA, through its efforts to develop homegrown talent, has helped put the notion of quote-unquote regional filmmaking in public notice by financially supporting the founding of or mounting of festivals in the regions and programming others. So, sinusupport ng NCCA yung mga film festivals na located sa iba't ibang probinsya o syudad. These festivals, next slide. These festivals include, parang nawala, okay. From Mindanao, Festival de Cinepaz in Zamboanga City, Cine Animo in Ozamis, Cinemagis Northern Mindanao Film Festival in CDO, Sala Mindanao Film Festival in General Santos City, Lantawan Soc Sargent Film Fest, Nabi Filmex in Abunturan, Compostela Valley, Cine Bugsay in Caraga, Nilnig and Mindanao Film Festival in Davao, and from Visayas, Cine Negrense, Negros Island Film Fest in Bacolod, Lutas, Negros Oriental Film Fest in Dumaguete, Sinulog Short Film Fest in Binisaya and Cebu, and the Traveling Cine Casimanua Western Visayas Film Fest, na based talaga sa Iloilo. And from Luzon, the North Luzon Film Festival, first held in Tuguegarao City, Pasale in Naga, Pelicultura, Calabarzon Film Fest held usually in Los Baños, and Cine Cabalen, Kapampangan Film Festival. In fact, video filmmaking outside of NCR began much earlier than 2008. And this is an important assertion that I'm making, and this did not result from the pretend period in Manila in the 2000s when over here in CCP and in UPFI, the meaning of indie cinema was being contested and defined against an ailing mainstream cinema. If you recall that period in the early 2000s, ano ba ang indie tinatanong natin? No? So, but actually, hindi yung pagtatanong na yon ang nagresulta ng regional cinema, but it comes earlier than that. No? We can backtrack to the 90s. In Negros, of course, we can backtrack much earlier, yung Cebuano cinema and Kidlat Tahimik. I'm not going to go that far, but we can backtrack up to the 90s at least. In Negros, short films were made out of the Negros Summer Workshop, established in 1991 by Becca Galiaga. In 1993, Elbert Banyares from Iloilo made Banal, an experimental film that won in the region as a regional entry in Gawad CCP. Soon after, the digital features Still Lives by John Red, Kamyas Overground by Can, which is a kind of an omnibus, and Motel by Ed Lejano, Nodoy Dadivas, and Chuck Escasa were made in Manila in 1999-2000. Teng Mangansakan already made this documentary, House Under the Crescent Moon, no? In 2001, which deals with the government's all-out war in Mindanao. And J.P. Carpio's Balay Daku, a feature about homecoming to Bacolod, was produced in 2002. In other words, sabay-sabay. No? In 2003, a group in Davao City led by Dax Canieto held a guerrilla filmmaking workshop, which was later renamed Mindanao Film Festival because apparently the name Guerrilla Film Festival didn't sit well in Mindanao. So, that produced short films and documentaries. So 2003, very earlier than Cinemalaya. In the following year, Ray Gibraltar from Iloilo put up the Bantayan Film Fest, which, with the help of Galiaga and cinematographer Ogie Sogatan, that featured short works by teachers and their yung mga participants ng workshop. Between 2004 and 2006, a group of friends started exploring film in Cebu and gave birth to Binisaya, a movement led by Keith Deligero, Christian Nilaban, Victor Villanueva, and Remton Zuasola before it became a film festival called Binisaya Film Festival. So these were happening all at the same time. So sa akin, it's a very basic argument that we hope we remember before we start historicizing regional cinema, that it wasn't a tangent of Manila. When Cinemalaya held its first edition in 2005, Lau Fajardo's film from Bacolod called Cultado received the jury prize, and when Cinema One Originals held its second edition, Sherrod Sanchez's Huling Balian ng Buhi received the Best Picture Award. Around that time, leading to Cinema Region, Mes de Guzman's Ang Daan Patungong Kalimugtong, 2005, set in Benguet, a number of Brillante Mendoza's films set in Guagua and Angeles, Pampanga, Masahista, Caleldo, Manoro, Alvin Yapan's Rolyo, 2007, set in Bicol, Sharon Dayok's Angan-Angan, 2008, set in Basilan, among others, were released. At that point onward, Cinemalaya, Cinema One, QC International Film Fest, and other Manila-based festivals will fund and screen films beyond NCR. The enabling, next slide. The enabling factors of digital technology and virtual networks of cinephilia were not imported from Manila to the provinces, which was the usual route of film culture in the celluloid century or the 20th century, but instead from the global elsewhere to urban and peri-urban formations in the islands. If you talk to the filmmakers from the regions, they're really into global films rather than Manila films, right? In other words, pareho rin nung nasa Manila, right? So in other words, digital film cultures in places like Pampanga, Bacolod, Iloilo, Cebu, Davao, and their outskirts developed alongside the one in Manila in synchronicity with developments of marginal cinemas, not just in the Philippines but around the world. The notion that these films are regional, in quotation marks, was given an official stamp by NCCA through Cinema Region, and in this way, the discursive debate as to what constitutes regional films began. Having been privileged to witness firsthand the mounting of Cinema Region for 6 out of its 11 years, I have seen and taken part in debates, heated, tempestuous, spirited, that went into the programming decision-making. Who should decide? Who should program? We're always fighting. You can't decide that, ganyan, every year, right? Because the idea is, because it's regional film festival, not because we're from NCCA, we should be the one saying which films. And sometimes you disagree with programmers from the region when you're from Manila, right? So parang, masusunod ba sila o masusunod ba kayo, right? Kasi, well, film scholar ka supposedly, right? So, what makes Tagalog-speaking films from Calabarzon different from the ones from Manila? It's an interesting example. What if the film spoken in Tagalog but was set in non-Tagalog speaking places? What if it was made by a filmmaker from that place, but the film is not from that place? Can a filmmaker make a film set in a place where she's not from? Alam natin yung mga ganitong issue some years back. What if it was written but not directed by a regional filmmaker? What if the actors are imported? If there is a vernacular language, is there vernacular aesthetics? What if the films is set in the region but is not culture specific? For example, sci-fi, pero set sa probinsya, like a horror film. What if the filmmaker was raised in Manila, schooled in UP or CSB or FEU, but goes back to the forebear's hometown? What if the film did not join a local film festival, meaning Bicol Film siya, pero hindi sumali sa pasali, halimbawa? The questions and their combinations are endless. This is where we are now, right? So this is where the research has to go, right? Regional filmmaking, programming, exhibition, and consumption are place-making negotiations. Each time we have a festival, we're really negotiating what it means. In this slide, regional cinema could refer just as well to how secondary cities in the Philippines had parallel experiences in cinemas across Southeast Asia. So ang ganda pong i-compare kasi kapareho. Ranging from the new waves in Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Saigon, Bangkok, pareho nung sa Manila, to the steady growth of alternative cinemas, quote-unquote regional din sa kanila, in Jogja, Makassar, Purbalingga, Sabah, Hanoi, Phnom Penh, Vientiane, Yangon, to name a few. In short, what galvanized filmmaking in Philippine regions in the digital period are the same global impulses that have energized the indie scene and the quote-unquote marginal or regional films in the larger Southeast Asian region. Meaning, grabe yung comparison, pare-pareho tayo ng pinagdadaanan. Siguro iba't-iba lang yung health niya at saka yung pagiging prolific. Some konti, sa atin grabe yung dami. No? So, thus, the establishment of Cinema Region and the growing consciousness of regional filmmaking in recent years actually indicate a lag in the recognition of films beyond Manila as part of the national cinema. Meaning 2008 lang natin sinabi, samantalang 90s pag magawa na sila. Of the long struggle for local stories to take their rightful place in the national imaginary. It is remarkable then that Tupog Imatoy, next slide please, with its urgent call about the besetting national problem, was only made in 2017 and earned acclaim in 2018. Sorry, next slide pa pala. So yan yung logo ng huling Cinema Region. Next slide. So R.D. Barbarona, the maker of Tupog Imatoy, received the Best Director prizes from the festival kung saan siya pinalabas. Di-discuss ko yun in a while. As well as in Famas and Gawad Urian. Next slide. Okay, so sining lokal pang international. Global cinema's discursive, cultural, and economic openness to other cinemas, again quotation marks, has encouraged the productivity of marginal films vying for a space in the center or creating niches in the peripheries. The proliferation of film festivals in the Philippines is an indication of this openness as well as a dual dimension of the films they promote. Meaning, the festivals are open, but at the same time, may duplicity. No? These festivals have been more welcoming of inventive works that would otherwise not be produced by mainstream studios, but at the same time, they compete in the market with each other by the sheer number of their outputs and more explicitly with commercial films in local city centers. On the other hand, these festivals serve as sources for global niche films that have figured well in the network of international film festivals, which means if you're a filmmaker from Bacolod and you want to get to, say, Cannes, then you have to go through some kind of Manila Film Festival or some kind of festival outside of your local place, right? So, may ganun siyang servicing, where validation is attained for quote-unquote national cinema because elsewhere, they don't say Bacolod yan or Manila yan. They think it's Philippine cinema. This double-coded aspiration is typified by Sinag Maynila, where Tupog Imatoy first premiered before being screened in Cinema Region. Unlike other festivals, Sinag Maynila does not produce films, but scouts for homegrown stories that are potential content for wider distribution. The festival, whose identity is anchored in the image of Manila, Sinag Maynila, as the center of filmmaking, is branded as enabling sineng lokal pang international, which alerts us to the complexity of the contemporary situation where initiatives by the state, such as the Cinema Region, and private corporations like Sinag Maynila are providing platforms for regional filmmakers. So, hindi lang siya good news, but it's a complex thing, right? So, that Tupog Imatoy, a fearlessly political film and a production on a shoestring, is programmed in Sinag Maynila, indicates how older paradigms that made clear distinctions between first, second, and third cinemas have become inoperable. And I'll discuss them very briefly. First cinema refers to industrial filmmaking. Movies made in this system have been the most productive and avidly patronized locally. So, Star Cinema, Regal, Reality, etc. And Sinag Maynila is doubtless one of the conduits and enablers of first cinema or this system of filmmaking. Hollywood, syempre, yung mother load niya, first cinema. So, lahat tayo ay subsumed sa Hollywood kung first cinema yung tinitingnan. Following a parallel path, non-conforming filmmakers have questioned the formulaic and profit-oriented values that define conventional movies. These are the movies that Prof. Nick Deocampo was talking about, or was talking about. These filmmakers have promoted a cinema that refuses to compromise artistic vision, a stance that forms an alternative second cinema. Films of this type are realized by indie artists rather than studio-employed craftspeople. Interestingly, in contemporary times, Sinag Maynila is part of this cultural economy as well, driven by festival production that ironically encourages innovation for an expanding market. At ang curator ng Sinag Maynila ay si Brillante Mendoza, meaning ang iniisip niya ay innovative films, right? So, third cinema, next slide please nga. Next slide yata ako. Third cinema is militant, anti-colonial, and anti-fascist. Such films do not aspire to be art, nor do they endeavor to be commercial, but they aim to be seen by as many people as possible because they expose national realities concealed in mass media. Clearly, the desire to shed light on what is obscured in public consciousness and the wide reach of the audience is at the heart of the production of Tupog Imatui. The plot of Tupog Imatui, ito na, malalaman nyo na yung kwento, dramatizes the lumad's experience of dislocation, sa kwento ng mga lumad, and his imagery gestures toward vanishing forest cover, so yung pagputol ng mga puno, and massive mining operations. Quite startlingly, the film closes with documentary footage, so it's sort of fictionalized, but it's based on a real story about when the lumad or the Bakwit were evacuating because their village, Talaingod, was militarized in Davao del Norte, and thousands of them were evacuating. So then, Tupog Imatui is about this one character of the lumad na kinidnap ng mga militar at ginawang guide para mahanap yung mga insurgents. Right? So it's based on a true story because the actual Ubunay whose story is told in Tupog Imatui will be shown sa dulo ng pelikula in a documentary footage, which is really startling. In older paradigms, second and third cinema films were expected to steer clear of first cinema structures. Any form of compromise was anathema to independence. But the globalization of marginal films is well documented, and the experiences of filmmakers laboring in the peripheries caution us from making sweeping claims, meaning hindi natin pwede sabihin na, pinalabas sa Sinag, Maynila, wala na siyang potency, right? Or pinalabas sa ganitong festival, which was easier to do, perhaps, in the 70s and 80s, right? From being conceived in Davao City, shot on location the border of Bukidnon, distributed through a Manila company, Sinag, Maynila, and exhibited in Tokyo, Berlin, next slide please, Luxor, Jakarta, to moving back to Mindanao and being screened in Davao. The itinerary of Tupog Imatui is instructive, for it reveals the constraints that regional filmmakers as ground-level agents must negotiate in order to be visible, right? So kung Mindanao, paano ko makikita ng buong mundo, right? At almost by default, kung kung makita ako ng mga tiga Maynila, almost by default, buong mundo yung tinatalakay. Because that is the route or circuit that they must take. It's kind of global circuit, no? So it's always a tainted circuit, is one of the arguments I want to push forward, where we create a new resistance. If Doc Nick Tiongson was saying yesterday that it was you create a political resistance within tradition, actually, I think now you create a political resistance within a global setup, right? I'm almost done because they say kailangan ko lang tapusin. Pero, konti na lang. Okay, next slide. It is a truism that mainstreaming the arts. Okay, sige, tatalon na ako. So what Tupog Imatui does that's important that we can appreciate is it contributes to this new category called fourth cinema, which was introduced in the 1990s, right? So fourth cinema essentially argues that yung second and third, or first, second, and third do not account for original inhabitants of a given place, right? So if we make films, for example, Avellana makes films about the Badjao, or kunwari, Sahaya ngayon, Sahaya, is that kung hindi sila Badjao, right, they're always from outside, right? And fourth cinema, this very notion is, they must make films about themselves. This is fourth cinema. This was put forward from New Zealand, no, ni Barclay, who talks about Maori cinema, meaning kung Maori kami, then kami gagawa ng pelikula namin. What I find interesting in Tupog Imatui is that because Barbarona is not exactly lumad, although his stepfather is, according to him, and he has high school friends who are lumad, ang ginawa nila sa process of filmmaking was a kind of immersion, right? So, ang katulong nila sa production ay lumad, ang mga nag-advise sa kanila. So, yung outsider trying to create this space with, or shared space. And again, Kidlat Tahimik is a good example of this in older cinemas, no? So sa akin, ang interesting lang though is when we say fourth cinema, it seems that it's about identity. But what I find important about Tupog Imatui is that it's not only about identity, but it's about land. Right? So ang galing because it is about, ano ba yung human identity? Kunwari yung costume na nakikita natin, which we don't see regularly in our national media. But at the same time, hindi yung costume yung mahalaga, pero ano ba nangyayari sa kanilang lupa? No? So on the level of the national, we have frequently heard about the situation of the lumad, framed in media as a question of political instrumentalization. Laging sinasabi, ginagamit ang mga lumad. The next slide, please. What I find interesting is yun nga, kasama yung lumad sa production. Tupog Imatoy shows that the lumad caught in the middle, their places of refuge militarized, as rebels blend with them while government military utilizes them in their counterinsurgency efforts. But the logic of the appalling threats made by our president of bombing lumad schools, because they have been politicized and have taken sides, misses the point. And the point is, whose birthright is the land? Here again, Tupog Imatoy as a particular case is instructive because it aimed in revealing how global forces have been relentless in their drive to erase societies in the peripheries in collusion with the state. And this is why I think regional cinema becomes very important, because the place is being erased, right? So we have to make films about these places being erased, exactly. So Tupog Imatoy reminds us that the lumad are the original inhabitants of the land who nevertheless stand to lose the most in the face of the never-ending war waged in the name of development. Framed in this way, the political project of art making is seen from a longer historical perspective, and the manobos in this context, yung mga bida rito sa kwento, stands side by side with Apaches in Oklahoma, Maori in New Zealand, Yupik in Eskimos in Alaska, Martus in Australia, Vedas in Sri Lanka, Was in Myanmar, etc., where they all make films about their locality. Which means it's not so much Philippine films, I think, but rather films that are threatened to be erased. Why are lumad places being militarized? Ultimately, this question cannot be addressed without reference to the international situation. Spaces of the lumad, the valiant lumad of the world, actually fourth cinema, native cinema siya, or lumad means native, di ba? Which I call lumad cinema. No? The valiant lumad of the world, in fact, have fought for centuries and today continue to resist encroachers, which is exactly why mayaman pa yung lupain nila. Kasi patuloy silang lumalaban. And therefore, yun ang gusto natin makamkam ng nasa labas, right? Be they Kankanais in Benguet, Mayans in Guatemala, etc. Maraming listahan. Which is why the richest natural reserves that transnational businesses are greedy to extract can still be found in the quote-unquote regions. The strategy of progress by dispossession, militarizing regional territories, so the extractive industries could pillage, is a global threat which have resulted to environmental degradation and human rights abuses. So interestingly, for me, Tupog Imatoy is a small film from the margin of Bukidnon, and then when it goes to Sinag, Maynila, and then to an international route, suddenly it is able to call upon a global audience to say, hey, what are you doing to these places that we're trying to save? So, yun po ang aking papel. Maraming salamat.